Welcome to the Thriving Mayor Show. Conversations with people making the biggest difference in the quality of living in our towns and cities, including former and current mayors and other special guests. Each interview features their wisdom, unique perspective, stories, and experiences shared in a casual conversation. Join us and comment on social media as we meet another leader in the life of our urban places. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Hubicki, the host of the Thriving Mayor Show. It's September 15th, 2021, and I'm super thrilled to have on the show again, on episode 32 this time, the Mayor of Barrie, Ontario, Jeff Lehman. Hi, Jeff.
Morning.
Welcome back to the show. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm well, thank you. It's a strange time for everyone, but I'm well and learning more every day I do this job.
Yeah. I just need to let everyone know that I did make a blunder, and I didn't download our original episode, which was supposed to be number 28 back in June, and so I've lost that file. And Jeff has been most gracious in granting me another opportunity, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Second time's a charm.
Yeah. Well, the first one was super fun, and I was so bummed when I found out I'd lost it. But it was an amazing conversation. I'm looking forward to our second time.
For sure.
Just so everyone knows, this episode was pre-recorded, but we always welcome social media posts, questions, comments on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, which we'll be posting on come September as well. And we'll do our best to respond back to those. I'll begin this episode by honoring the land and the Indigenous peoples who've lived here from the beginning. I'm grateful for the opportunity to live here and thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land, the Bay of Quinte, for thousands of years. In particular, I honor the ancestors of the land, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples. This territory is covered by the 1783 Crawford Purchase. Jeff Lehman is the 46th mayor of the City of Barrie, having been re-elected to a third term in 2018 with 91% of the popular vote. Mayor Lehman is currently chair of Ontario's Big City Mayors Caucus, representing Ontario's 29 largest cities. He's a founding director of Alectra, the second largest community-owned utility in North America, serving more than 1 million customers in Southern Ontario. He holds a BA from Queen's University and a master's degree with first-class honors from the UK's London School of Economics. And as an economist, he writes and speaks frequently on issues affecting Canada's cities. And in 2019, the prestigious US business magazine Fast Company named Jeff one of its top 100 most creative people in business for his innovative solutions in government. He's a passionate believer in transforming urban economies through public and private entrepreneurship. And from Jeff's Instagram, one of my favorite tags of all the mayors who we've had on the show or have been researching is the Jedi mayor. A mayor of Barrie, an unrepentant fan of evidence. Unity and prosperity begins with empathy and courage. And one day I'll run a diner in the mountains. And we'll get back to that. But Jeff, thanks again for being on the show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you.
Well, it's a delight to be here. And I should begin saying, we here in Barrie, we're on the territory of the Anishinaabe as well. The Three Fires Confederacy, which here is the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations, and they're collectively the Three Fires Confederacy. It's also a fascinating part of the country because it was once the land of the Huron-Wendat. Huronia is the name for the region around Barrie, and for those who, like myself, are learning more as every week goes by about the pre-colonial history of this country, which we all need to take much more time to learn. Our region has a fascinating history among the original Indigenous inhabitants. So thanks for recognizing that at the start today, Michael. And thanks, of course, for having me on the podcast. It's a delight to chat with you on the show.
Yeah, it was. Again, it was such a sad thing when I found out I deleted that first file because I really enjoyed our show, and I'm sure we'll hear all the same kind of insights and powerful thoughts, plus some more, because you've had a really interesting summer.
I have. I said to my CAO, let's see, we've had plague with COVID. We've had locusts with gypsy moths. We've had fire we had a propane explosion earlier in the summer, and then we had a tornado. We're running out of horsemen of the apocalypse here in Barrie. But what that means is we have really had more reasons to value the kind of work that's done to prepare for these situations. And also, to be frank, the collaboration that goes on. I mean, one of the wonderful things about being in municipal politics is it is never boring, because there's so many different things that we do. And these situations have required collaboration among so many. So there are positives out of it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And with vaccinations rising and going through our stages now and reopening and hopefully moving into post-pandemic life again, it's wonderful to see mayors taking that leadership role and being out there in the community. And during the tornado, I was monitoring a little bit and saw your posts, reaching out to the community and thanking your people that were emergency workers that were there. It was quite spectacular, and we'll get to that a little bit. But I just wanted to share. It was kind of a fun coincidence that I was first kind of saw you on the internet when you were on Bring Your A Game. Sure. for Canada's Top Mayor Award, and the episode you were on was with the mayor of Inuit, Natasha Kulikowski, and she was on last week on the show.
Oh, great!
And I think she said, and I was on with Jeff, and I think he was talking about his community was the capital or the founding place of butter tarts.
Yeah, so this is hotly contested, Michael, and I mean, right at the top of the issues list. No, there's a butter tart festival in Midland, Ontario, and I would never suggest that Midland is not the center of gravity for the butter tart community in Canada now, but we do definitely have a claim to the first published recipe for a butter tart that anyone's been able to track was in 1912. And it was in a recipe book by the Ladies Auxiliary of the Royal Victoria Hospital here in Barrie. So they published a cookbook. I think it was a fundraiser. They're still doing things like that. And there it was. But, the much hotter issue is pecans or no pecans, and especially raisins or no raisins. Is it even a butter tart?
I'm with you on the raisins or no raisins. When I see you can pick one or more different varieties. Yeah, I'm always going sans raisin.
Yeah, for sure.
And speaking about food, tell us about your diner in the mountains.
Oh, that is a reference to Atlas Shrugged, which is a very, it's a book that's become more controversial with time, not less.
Yeah.
But the reference is, and it's, you have to have read the book to understand why somebody who has quite different political values would reference that. It's because the philosopher who is the sort of mentor of some of the heroes in the book becomes so unhappy with the direction of society that he drops out and runs a diner in the mountains. And, that is a little bit of me admitting my fear and frustration. Mm-hmm. It's also a little bit of me recognizing something which I think is so important, which is that all work is important. And my first job was cooking at a diner when I was quite young as a teenager. And so I identify with that scene a great deal because he's happy and he has time to reflect and write. And even though he's unhappy with how the world is, and that's not really why I have that little quote in my Instagram bio, it's because the simplicity of the work there and the clarity of running a diner appeals to me. Yeah. It still appeals to me, even though I do something much more complex today. But I admit as well, it's a little bit of I'm concerned about the polarization in our society. I mean, it's not really about the way Rand was writing about things back in the day. It to me, it's not because I'm afraid of the direction of politics in the sense of left or right. For me, I reference that because I'm really concerned about the polarization. I don't care where you are in the political spectrum. Yeah. I think that's the biggest challenge facing any elected official today, is that polarization.
Yeah, it's bringing people together.
Yeah.
Which in a diner you can do with food.
Food brings people together. Yeah. Like almost nothing else. And, I think, the ability for people who are in public life to create a big tent and rally a wide constituency behind a new idea is certainly under threat. And it's under threat because of systemic things like social media, where you have to be outrageous to get clicks, right? Mm-hmm. And that includes politicians. You've got to have something outrageous to say or show, because that attracts more attention and that drives more traffic, which makes you more popular, which makes you more successful. Trump is the obvious master of that, unfortunately. But so many follow that formula now, and even at my level, which is not a good thing.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
Wow. And speaking of social media, I did take some time and like, as I mentioned, and scrolled through your Instagram and Facebook, and your pages are so full of joy and energy and giving. And what are some of yours and your family's, your girlfriend, and what are some of your favorite ways of staying in a thriving mindset and engaged, with the environment and the things that you love?
So travel is one thing, and in this year of COVID, that's been obviously much closer to home, but we still travel. And it's funny, I will admit we go for drives, and in some of the toughest parts of COVID, when you couldn't go anywhere and things were locked down, sometimes we'd hop in the car for a bit because there's literally not much else to do. But that change of environment, change of scenery, even if it was just out the window, helps to level set. And we just got back actually from Ottawa and Quebec City, doing a little showing our kids, who are all girls. Between us, we have 4 girls.
Wow.
So that was a lot of people in one SUV, and a lot of activity. I felt like camp director a little bit some of the time, but just
what are their ages?
So 4, 8, 12, and 19.
Wow.
And so quite a mix. But that's actually helpful, because none of them are so close together that they can't have a little bit of a big sister, little sister relationship.
Yeah.
And they get along amazingly well, and they did incredibly well with the travel. But that's important. I mean, I think when we all live in our own bubbles in our own lives, and unfortunately sometimes those bubbles, we can sort of bounce off the walls and keep looking inward, and you got to break out. And breaking out doesn't necessarily mean you need to physically leave or travel, but there's got to be things that break you out of your routine and consistent mindset and expose you to new ideas and new places and new things. That's adventure. That's what keeps life interesting. And we want to teach our kids that. So travel is a way to do that. Trying something new activities. And, I'm so fortunate to be mayor of a city that's growing so quickly, because there's always something new happening here, whether it's an event or a new business or a new attraction, a new sport or something like that to try, organizations. So, year by year, we never lack for something new to take them to or to do in Central Ontario, which is just a wonderful and thriving part of the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. And obviously, reading and the arts and culture in Barrie, or parks and recreation, arts and culture of Barrie are thriving as well. And back in my consulting days, I remember whenever the City of Barrie would put out an RFP for a park, it was always one of our favorites to try to win, and had a couple of projects in Barrie, and it was always just such a pleasure, to work in the community with the mayor and council and the staff, and it's just beautiful part of the province.
Yeah, I think there's a connection, kind of a unique thing around our city, which relates to where we are geographically, but also our relationship to the natural environment. Obviously, we're a waterfront city, and that's in many ways the defining kind of geography of Barrie. It wraps itself around a bay inside a bit of a natural stadium, because most of the older part of the city, the inner part of the city, is the old shoreline. So there's hills. And it's like the whole city is a stadium watching what's happening on the waterfront. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But as well, Central Ontario, I think, has a really unique connection, because we're part, Toronto, GTA, but we're part Muskoka. We're actually where those two, in a way, identities or vibes meet. So people who live here, are tied into that GTA economy, and there's a lot of energy and dynamism in the GTA economy and opportunity. But they're in Barrie in part because of the Muskoka lifestyle, if you will, which is much more of a sort of four-season recreation kind of lifestyle. So aside from the waterfront, you got just a ton of people here who do things like go camping, play outdoor sports, team sports with kids. Team sports are huge here with our kids. But you're right about the parks. Last thought on that, we do have 134 parks, which for a city of 150,000 is a big number. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, and we're trying to be more and more creative as we build them. I mean, I think there's standard things you find in municipal parks, maybe a playing field, usually a playground, some unprogrammed space. But now we're starting to do a much broader mix of those kinds of green spaces, some more smaller unprogrammed spaces in our urban locations, more naturalized settings in some of the natural heritage system, the creek systems and ravines and those sorts of things. And ultimately, it all goes together to create a city where we hope that everybody has the opportunity to enjoy the outdoors within a few minutes of their home.
Yeah, that's so important. And one of the past couple months ago, Municipal World magazine put a park on the front cover, and the heading was "Parks are our new medicine." During the pandemic, there was people really, I think, got such a boost in their well-being by being outdoors locally and enjoying their local open space, park space, trails, and things like that.
Yeah. So funny story about that from COVID. You may remember playgrounds were very briefly closed by the Ontario government as part of a shutdown in, I think it was May, might have been April.
Yeah.
I think it was May. And that didn't go over too well, especially with a number of mayors. And at the time, you're talking about my Instagram, I posted this picture. And I was at a playground. And I did a selfie looking, and I was mad, and it showed on my face in the picture. I looked cranky in the picture, and there's the playground empty in the background with tape on it. What do? We get a caution tape on the swing set. I mean, it's terrible. And I said, this is wrong. We need to give our kids something. We can't take everything. We've taken so much away. Rightly, we've had to introduce public health restrictions, all kinds of stuff that we have to do to stop the spread. But this one, come on, we got to let the kids have this. And many other mayors joined me in that. I was certainly not alone in that. I remember that Saturday so well. It was a Saturday morning. I walked over to my neighborhood park and took that picture. Well, the avalanche really piled on, and the Ontario government reversed course by that afternoon.
Quickly.
Very quickly. I remember going for a walk with my family, with Caro and her kids and my parents. And we were out in a park, and I tore the caution tape off, and a guy got mad at me. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, the government just said they can stay open. And he said, "Oh, well, that's really good." So, it does go to show there are positive things that can happen from the sort of democracy of social media.
And did that fella recognize you as the mayor?
No, that was the funny part. I mean, I was in casual clothes, and I think he just saw some guy ripping down caution tape, and he kind of came over and said, "Hey, you shouldn't be doing that."
Yeah, and Mayor Cam Guthrie of Guelph was on the show just after that. And that was something that he was laughing about too, and he did exactly the same thing you did. Like right away, got out into the playground, did I think it was Facebook post on it, and that was impressive that they did about face on that so quickly. So as if the pandemic wasn't enough, this summer. And you mention it, you're kind of like Hurricane Hazel now, but Tornado Lehman. What was that experience like with?
Well, it's my third tornado in my lifetime in Barrie, And I mean, it's happened enough that people are sort of saying this Tornado Alley thing is really real. I mean, is this Kansas? I mean, if you follow the data, and I'm a major weather geek, so I do. And by the way, I'll put a plug in for a guy named Dr. Dave Sills, who now lives in London, but lived in Barrie for about 20 years. He is Environment Canada's tornado investigator. He goes where there is a tornado, that EF 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. He's that guy. Environment Canada has officially classified it as X. He's that guy.
So you have him on speed dial.
Yeah, well, and we're Twitter friends, and we DM'd a lot, and we continue to. But he's also a musician, which doesn't hurt. Yeah. But anyway, so this tornado, there was a massive tornado in 1985 in Barrie. 8 people lost their lives, 600 homes were destroyed. Then the Angus tornado, which was 2014, ended in Barrie, and there was a little bit of damage in the south end, some homes that lost windows and things. Nobody got hurt. What was amazing about this tornado was it was certainly powerful enough to cause very serious injury or death. And not only did nobody get killed, nobody even got really seriously injured. We had a couple of injuries that were serious enough to require hospitalization. Everyone was released within 3 days. It was astonishing. And some of that I actually credit to our city has a little bit of memory of the other ones. And people instinctively knew, because when I walked around the neighborhood, for days I walked around the neighborhood after, and I talked to people. What do you need? How can we help? What's going on? And everybody told the story of where they were at 2:48, exactly what they saw, what they heard, what they did. So many people, Mike, went down to their basements. Wow. Instinctively. Nobody told them to do that, right? Yeah. And they maybe had learned that at some point. That's what you do if there's a storm that looks that bad. Yeah. But so many did that, and I'm sure it saved lives. So anyway, and then I think the rescue and recovery, or the rescue piece of it, was over very quickly because we were able to account for everybody by later that evening, and things were complicated by there were 2 torrential downpours in the afternoon after the storm. And the problem with that, aside from hampering the work of the first responders, is of course, people's roofs had been blown off, and then in comes this huge amount of water, which just wrecks everything in the house, which really added to the misery. But we were able to account for everybody by that night, which is astonishing work by Barrie Fire and Police. And Alectra, I can't say enough, they had the power back on for 91% of the affected area by that night. And why that was so important is it was really hot. Yeah. And so all your food's going to go bad. Everybody's going to try and, deal with, no air conditioning, no relief, and no light to try and do the recovery and response effort, except for, generator lights. So them getting the power back on made such a difference. The power was off for a week in 1985. Yeah. Power was off for less than 12 hours in 2021. So what a difference that made. And then the community response started, and it was really remarkable over the days and weeks after.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we'll get to Alectra in a little bit. But yeah, thank you so much, and congratulations on the community and your leadership and pulling that together with your teams is really astounding. And it just goes with being prepared and taking things seriously. Like we hear about hurricanes in Florida, or Georgia, and people are like, well, I'm not leaving. It's just another one of these, and
well, and I think, honestly, politicians aren't that much of a use in a disaster. We're not firemen or policemen in this. Our primary job is communication, actually, and there is obviously some very important decision making about the bigger picture, but all the tactical stuff, where to deploy resources, what to do next, is managed by the emergency team, which is the fire, police chief, paramedic chief, and the CAO of the city. Right. And they really swung into action. And ironically, I think the fact that we've all gotten really good at Zoom, even when we're in our vehicles, hopefully not driving, became really important. And, that was an aspect of this disaster that we've not had previously. Normally you'd convene a conference call, or some of these people would actually get together in a boardroom. Now it was Zooms. So I was with the deputy fire chief in his SUV, because I was down in the area within about 15 minutes. And I hopped in his SUV in the back, and he had his phone like this, and we're on the Zoom with the whole team. So the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center or group, EOG, were able to meet virtually about every half an hour to an hour through the course of that evening, and it made a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So changing channels a little bit, Jeff, where did you spend your childhood, your early years, and can you recall back to maybe a trigger, an aha moment that springboarded you into politics?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So one of the strange things about life, I now live, I bought a house last fall, fortunately a little bit before the market really hit its peak, but it was still tough. Yeah. Anyway, bought a house in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So I live about 3 blocks away from where I grew up, which is just weird. Yeah. Like, I'm taking my kids over to this park that I went to when I was a kid. But it's great, and it's aged beautifully, and it's a wonderful, very cohesive neighborhood. But I grew up in Allendale Heights, very classic Canadian suburb. Thanks to a great premier, Bill Davis, I was able to walk to school because there was a school in my neighborhood. And the trigger question. So when I was 9, 10 years old, there was this ravine that we tobogganed in the winter in Allendale. And the ravine was not an official park. It was kind of a green space, but it was pretty steep on the one side. Yeah. And I had a creek at the bottom, right? And the creek, it was a creek. It had some rocks in it and stuff. So it was always a little bit dangerous in the sense that if you kept going and you weren't watching what you were doing, you could slide into the creek. Yeah. Well, the city came along one day and put up signs that said no tobogganing, because they were concerned about people getting hurt. And I understand why they did that, but they took away fun for hundreds of kids. And especially during the winter. Exactly. And we are Central Ontario town. We love to get outside. Mine's better premium in the winter. And we get a lot of snow too, right? Yeah. So tobogganing is a thing. And my parent, I didn't know what to do, but I was upset by it. And my parents said, well, why don't you write to your city councillor? And we'll help you, and my dad's an urban planner and my mom's very involved in the community. So they obviously helped a lot. Yeah. We wrote to the 2 city councillors, and to their credit, Mike, one councillor actually came to our house to meet with me. Wow. And the other one called. And I spoke to both of them, and they took it to council, and they actually did take the signs down. And then they did something even better, which was they naturalized the creek. They fixed the creek. So they took the rock out and they put some grass in and made it safe. Next summer. Yeah. So it worked. And that always stuck with me for 2 reasons. 1, if you speak up, maybe you can make some change. 2, local government's really responsive and it's really practical. And that always stuck with me. So later I got involved in federal politics a little bit at the time of the federal referendum on sovereignty for Quebec and a few other issues and things. But always I was really interested in cities. And that's ultimately what I went to school for. But that 9-year-old letter when I was 9 years old always stuck with me. Yeah, that's really cool. And your dad being an urban planner, I think he had his own firm. And did you spend some summers working with him in the firm? And well, it goes back even before that. So my dad built his company by traveling around Northern Ontario, and often he was the guy who wrote the first official plan for municipalities in the north. Okay, and sometimes their first zoning bylaw as well. And it's funny because people in Northern Ontario back then, probably still, they're a little suspicion of Toronto consultants, right? Like, don't come up here, take our money, and tell us how to run our little northern town. Yeah. But Barrie was kind of okay because Barrie is a smaller town. We're in Central Ontario, so maybe he was okay. So he didn't face as much of that. But anyway, I got to go with him. He would take me sometimes when it made sense to go to places like Espanola and Blind River and Manitouwadge and Timmins. And I grew to know Temagami really well because Dad did a bunch of work there when I was in, sort of 10, 11, 12 years old. And then I went to I was lucky enough to go to a summer camp there. Yeah. And so I got to know that part of the province. And then later I worked in the family business, for 3 or 4 summers. And that was almost all with municipalities. So I guess I kind of came to it naturally that way. Yeah, I recall I had a really similar childhood too with my dad started his engineering business in 1962. Right. And I think by the time I was
10 or 11, I was in the office on some weekends and some evenings coloring maps. And back in the day, everything was drawn by hand with the blueprint machine, and then we'd have to make 8 copies for a public presentation or for the report. So every part had to get colored by hand, and that was my introduction to landscape architecture and planning and urban design a little bit. But it really stuck with me and was super influential in my life and career as well.
Do you remember Letra set? The letters that you'd rub off a plastic sheet so that you'd get a letter onto the I love that stuff as a kid. I would play with it in the office.
Yeah, we had another one called Leroy.
Yeah, sure.
And it was a stencil with a little metal template, and you put different kinds of ink pens in and you'd follow it. And so back in the day, if you could Leroy quickly, you were worth your weight in gold.
Well, I could Surlocks bind documents quickly. We had a Surlocks binding machine where you'd punch 10 sheets and put it to the side, and then punch the next 10 sheets, then put the coil binder on and close it. And that's how you put a document together. And that's the kind of work I did when I first started. Because you're right. Yeah, you got to produce 20 copies all manually kind of thing. And off you go.
Yeah, but there was that sense of accomplishment when you had that document.
Felt great. Yeah, felt good. A whole box of, proposals for a job or a final report for a job or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the technology's changed so much in the way that we can communicate.
Yeah, it's not quite the same clicking send. I mean, there's some satisfaction when you click send and there's that document attached, but
yeah, awesome. And moving a little bit now more towards your political journey, Jeff. We heard about when you were 9, but then the first run at political office and deciding to run for mayor. Things like that. What were did you have a champion who really kind of sparked your passion? Or
I had a few mentors. There was the first mayor of the City of Barrie, a guy named Willard Kinsey, who lived to be 99 years old and just passed away a few years ago. I got to know him a bit, and and also another great mayor of Barrie, Janice Laking, who was a family friend from early on. My dad had known her from early years in Barrie. But I ran for Ward 2, which is the downtown ward, when I was 29 years old, and was successful as the councillor there. And then what happened in 2009, the mayor of the day had gotten into some trouble and was on the outs with council, and it was clearly going to be a change election. And, I was 34. Could I be that change? I thought I could. And so I ran, but I was a long shot. The first poll that came out, I was a distant 4th. But we ran a really great campaign. I had a brilliant campaign manager guy who's now a national pollster named Keto Maggie. He's the CEO of Main Street Research, and he ran my 2010 mayoral campaign. It was just brilliant. We did lots of great stuff. Energetic team, and what happened, my numbers just started to slowly rise, and then they really took off when people started paying attention in the last 2 weeks of the election. So I won, and I've been fortunate enough to be reelected twice since, without a lot of opposition. So I appreciate that, but I never want to ever take that for granted. You earn this. I said in my speech when I declared I was running in 2010, I will earn the job every day I'm on it. And as soon as I lose that feeling or have any sense of entitlement, I think that's the point at which you should leave. But I don't feel that way. I feel like this is a job that I want to earn. And the days that I don't feel like I really earned it because I didn't make enough progress, it bugs me.
Yeah.
So I still have that burn for sure, even 11 years later.
Yeah. Well, the winning your last election by 91% is a pretty clear indication that it's, I interviewed Steve Pellegrini the other day, and he's won his last 2 by acclamation. And you'd think that the other candidates up in Barrie would kind of get the message.
Well, it was awfully close, Mike. The guy, I was unopposed until the last day of nominations. And there's a guy who ran, he'd run against me in 2014. And he felt there should be an election. And you know what? I'm kind of glad.
Yeah.
Because it is a little too easy to get an overinflated sense of yourself if you don't have to run. And what it forced us to do is and I ran a campaign. We put a platform out, said, this is what I want to do. Hold me to this over the next 4 years. And it brings people together. And we probably didn't run the same depth and cost and size of campaign we might have otherwise. But it was, in retrospect, I'm glad he did.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot more interesting too.
Well, it was interesting. He had some interesting views. So we had a couple of debates.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And they got a little weird. I'm not going to lie. He had some views about why certain things were the way they were, and he had some conspiracies that he felt were happening, and they were a little out there. But I took again those opportunities to just say, look, that's not true. This is the case, and these are the numbers. And I've always liked Daniel Patrick Moynihan, U.S. Senator. He had a great expression: "You're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts." Yeah. And that expression has come back to me so many times through the course of COVID, because that is the problem we've got right now, big time. Yeah.
Well, and Trump really demonstrated that well too, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Alternative facts.
Yeah. So we're kind of getting close to our 40 minutes, but I did want to again give you a chance to share with us some of these really interesting entrepreneurial moments that you've had at the city, such as the utility and the shift government and the health accord, and being the chair of Ontario's big city mayors must be a really interesting role as well.
Yeah, well, and maybe in reverse order. I mean, OBCM, Ontario's Big City Mayors, we've become much more organized, much more prominent over the last couple of years. Cam Guthrie was the chair before me, actually. Yeah. And I think, we have a really unique voice because we're nonpartisan, but the 29 of us represent more than almost 3/4, of Ontario's population. And we're pragmatic because we're mayors. So when we come out and speak about things, I think we carry the weight of it's not a partisan view. It's a pragmatic view. Yeah. And of course, all of us have platforms in our own communities. So John Tory's been very active, which has been great because he's brought the weight of Toronto to it. And that's been a good collaboration, especially during COVID. So it was a nice segue. I mean, I'm a huge believer in municipal collaboration, and Alectra is an amazing example of that, where it's owned by 7 municipalities, and it was formed by the municipalities getting together and saying, with climate change, we're going to need more resilience, more capacity to respond to extreme weather. We need to shift our energy production. The whole way electricity is distributed is going to change, from hierarchical poles and wires from power stations to outlets, to people producing it through solar panels, storing it in their car batteries as EVs are adopted. Yeah, everything's changing. Very exciting time, but we need scale to be able to meet those challenges. So ultimately, the 7 cities that got together are some of the more progressive and fast-growing cities in Ontario: Mississauga, Markham, Vaughan, Barrie, Guelph, St. Catharines, and Hamilton. And, in our joint ownership of Alectra, I think we are now much more than the sum of our parts. And I'm really proud of what that company's been able to accomplish. And it relates to that last piece you mentioned, which is shift government. And shift government is the shift. It's a project at the City of Barrie, and we're trying to act like a startup. The project team here at the city, we're trying to act like a startup within the corporation, where we bring certain projects to sort of minimal viable product, and try it out. And some of them will fail and some will succeed. But they're innovative ideas that have at their core shifting from being reactive in our service delivery to proactive. And I can give you lots of models or examples, but I'll just give you one for today, which is where we are able to shift from responding to people who are in crisis, whether it's mental health or addictions or other, health crises, to proactively supporting them in the root causes of those problems. We're going to lessen the burden on emergency services. And we municipalities spend half of our budget, fully half on our emergency services. So any fire, any medical call, any crime that we can prevent by working on root causes, or in some cases by bringing the service needed to people ahead of time, by catching them before they fall, that has a fiscal benefit, a business case, a return, but far more importantly, it has such a human benefit. So I won't get into all the things we're trying to do there, but please look it up for those who are watching. There are web pages on what we're trying to do with shift government, and it ultimately is a whole philosophy that says, it's more than just an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. It is all about, tackling the root causes of some of these complex urban challenges.
Yeah, that's so impressive, and I'll put the links into to the show notes as well. On kind of a personal note, Jeff, and in your discussions with the other mayors, what are some of the challenges that mayors are facing right now as we're coming out of the pandemic and just being a mayor?
Yeah. I mean, easily the top one is combating disinformation and the sort of virulence of, pardon the expression, I guess, since we're talking about a pandemic, but the virulence of the hate. I mean, the negativity right now and the enabling of extremely hateful kind of communication online. I mean, we get a ton of it. A lot of that bounces off my back because I've been doing this for a while, and that's fine. It really bothers me when I see my friends or family or somebody who's somehow associated with me getting stuff thrown at them, and I sort of draw the line there. But what bothers me more is just the polarization in our political discourse. I mean, I think the biggest challenge right now for any mayor is people are just shouting at each other, and they're in an echo chamber that reinforces their own views with confirmation bias and information that feeds their view.
Yeah.
Or they're on the other team and they're just yelling at them. and it's tough. And I think one of the things that burns through that is pragmatism.
Yeah.
And I think that's the unique strength of local government and mayors, which is, there's an old expression, there's no conservative or liberal way to snowplow a road. You just clear the snow or you don't, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of what we do is on that level. You build the park or you don't. And we can avoid some of the polarization by just being good at city building. And sure, there are value considerations that enter into that, and they should. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, so much of what we do is about pragmatic steps to build our community. And that in many ways finds the common ground, even among those who otherwise are just shouting at the other side or the perceived other side.
Yeah, so true. And then as a mayor with such a clear, well, you mentioned platform, but also vision, so that the people can get behind it. It's clearly magnetic, is that you're drawing people to the vision for a better life, a higher or better quality of living in the community, collaboration, helping in neighborhoods.
Yeah.
These kinds of things which are,
it's tough, I think, Mike, to communicate these things. And you're right, because I think the key there, so Barrie has had a 33% drop in the crime rate, just the raw rate, in the last 10 years, which is more than twice the Canadian number.
Wow.
And there's a lot of reasons for that relate to the community itself.
Yeah.
The way that we're addressing some of the root causes of crime. And I think our police force do a wonderful job. And I think our community cares about one another. And there's people who pay attention to these things. But I think, that's not the perception, right? Yeah. If you did a poll, I'm sure
it's not
people.
The news.
Well, and people think in many cases they're more afraid of crime. Like I walked to school. My parents let me walk to school. Not a lot of parents let their kids walk to school. When you ask them why, some of them are afraid their kids are going to be approached by someone. And yet the chance of that is much lower than it was when our city was even much smaller years ago. Yeah. So linking the reality to the outcomes, or the outcomes to the data to the outcomes, and showing people that this really is benefiting their community becomes important to their buy-in. But yeah, that is the challenge for sure in building community collaboration.
Wow, it's really awesome. Jeff, I know you have to go, so I think we're going to have you back for a third time, our second aired episode, but amazing insights and your recollection of history and people and facts and places and is really interesting, and I love your storytelling.
Oh, well, thank you. I think
Abraham
Lincoln was the master of that, right? He would tell a simple story or an allegory to communicate, and I certainly don't claim anything like that. But the more I do this job, the more I understand the power of that, and it is really important. Yeah.
Any last thoughts or comments?
Well, I guess to the people watching who are sort of interested in the municipal world, please do watch what OBCM is doing, what Alectra is doing, because I think they are examples of ways forward for cities. I think the collaboration that's going on already among big city mayors really demonstrates the value of municipal government and the strength of that collaboration on policy. We're going to have a lot to say over the next 6 months about some pretty big issues. We've already been out calling for decriminalization of drugs to address the root causes of addiction and crime. And we do that following our police chiefs and others. But the reason I mention that is I think municipal collaboration is going to be one of the keys to success to tackling the big issues of our time: climate change, mental health and addictions, housing, which we haven't even talked about today, and there's a lot to do there. So watch those organizations for everyone watching this show.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. And if you can stay on just for a second after, just want to say thank you again.
Of course.
So take care, everybody. On the show next week is the British Columbia Council for International Cooperation, who are going to be explaining to us their toolkit for climate change for municipalities. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining the Thriving Mayor Show. Make sure to like and share and tell your friends and colleagues. Mayors are awesome and are the change agents to enhance the quality of living for over 80% of us. Remember what Coach Wooden said: you cannot live a perfect day without doing something for someone who can never repay you. Much love and peace. Until next time.